Jesus Christ made a woman pay for mocking an elderly woman in church. No one expected it. The cup tilted and scalding coffee splashed across a frayed dress on the marble floor. Laughter echoed where prayers were supposed to live. An elderly woman dropped to her knees, stunned by pain and shame, while phones lifted to capture the moment. Some faces looked away, others smiled. No one moved. From the shadow of the confessional, a man in white stood up. He did not shout. He did not rush. He simply watched every smirk, every cruel whisper, every second the old woman struggled to breathe. The church seemed to hold its breath with him. The stained glass caught the light and fractured it across the pews, as if time itself had cracked. Outside, the city kept moving. Inside, something ancient stirred. Those who mocked would soon discover that humiliation leaves fingerprints, that truth has weight, and that when mercy is ignored, justice does not arrive loudly, it arrives precisely. Within hours, the woman who laughed would begin to lose everything she believed defined her, and the woman on the floor would rise untouched by the stain, because someone had seen it all. And this time, he did not look away. The church of St. Michael the Archangel woke before the city did. Morning light slipped through stained glass windows, painting the empty pews in muted blues and golds. The air carried the faint scent of old incense and lemon cleaner. At that hour, before parishioners arrived and cameras came out, the building belonged to one person. Evelyn Morales moved slowly across the marble floor with a bucket and a worn mop, her footsteps careful, almost apologetic. For more than 3 decades, she had come before sunrise, long before the doors opened, long before anyone noticed whether the church was clean or not. Her knees ached as she bent. Her hands cracked and rough trembled slightly as she wrung the cloth. Still, she worked with the same quiet precision, as if each pass of the mop were a prayer. She did not complain. She never had. In the small trailer she called home, there was little more than a narrow bed, a chipped table, and a wooden crucifix darkened by age. Every morning before leaving, Evelyn touched that cross and whispered the same words, "Thank you for another day." Not for comfort, not for relief, just gratitude. She had learned long ago that faith did not always look like answered prayers. Sometimes it looked like endurance. As she cleaned the altar steps, she paused to catch her breath. The church was still empty, or so it seemed. The silence felt thick, almost watchful. Somewhere near the confessional, a shadow shifted slightly, though no footsteps followed. Evelyn did not notice. She rarely looked up. Her eyes had grown used to being unseen. She wiped the front pews, next polishing the wood until it shone. This was the same place she had knelt countless mornings to pray for one person above all others, her daughter. Not for success, not for wealth, only that her heart would soften, that shame would loosen its grip, that truth would find its way home. Years ago, Evelyn had stopped expecting visits. Calls came rarely now, if at all. The world her daughter lived in had no room for reminders of where she came from. Evelyn understood that more than anyone. Poverty teaches you how easily you can be erased. Still, she prayed. From the far side of the church, unseen and unacknowledged, the man in white remained still. His presence did not disturb the air. He did not announce himself. He watched Evelyn with a gaze that held memory and meaning far deeper than the building around them. He saw the nights she went hungry so her child could eat, the years she carried grief without bitterness, the prayers whispered when no one else listened. The church bells had not yet rung. The doors had not yet opened, but something was already in motion. Evelyn returned to her work, unaware that the God she had trusted in silence for a lifetime was standing only a few steps away, and that before this day was over, what had been hidden would be revealed, what had been mocked would be defended, and what had been broken would begin to rise. Long before the marble floors of St. Michael ever reflected her silhouette, Evelyn Morales learned what it meant to disappear quietly. She was 28 when her husband collapsed in a break room at a warehouse on the south side of the city and never stood up again. By nightfall, she was a widow with a toddler on her hip, a rent notice on the table, and a silence so heavy it pressed the air from her lungs. She buried her grief the way she buried everything else, deep and without ceremony. There was no time to fall apart. Vanessa needed milk. Bills needed names written on checks. Morning came whether Evelyn was ready or not. The years that followed blurred into a rhythm of early alarms and late returns. Evelyn cleaned offices after midnight, scrubbed restaurant kitchens before dawn, and took whatever hours she could find in between. Some weeks she slept in a chair, shoes still on, because it was easier than lying down only to rise again. Her hands grew thick and scarred. Her back learned a constant ache. But Vanessa never missed a meal, never missed school, never doubted she was loved. On Sundays, Evelyn braided her daughter's hair and walked them both to church. Vanessa would fidget in the pew, swinging her feet, while Evelyn bowed her head and prayed not for miracles, but for strength that lasted. When Vanessa asked why they prayed so much, Evelyn answered simply, because love needs help to stay strong. There were nights when the refrigerator held little more than bread and a jar of peanut butter. Evelyn would claim she had already eaten, pushing the plate toward her daughter with a smile that fooled no one but a child who wanted to believe. Later, when Vanessa slept, Evelyn sat at the table with her rosary wrapped around her fingers, whispering hopes she never spoke aloud. She watched Vanessa grow into a bright, ambitious young woman with eyes that searched the world for more. Evelyn encouraged it even when it scared her. She ironed borrowed clothes so her daughter would look like she belonged. She signed school forms with careful pride. She celebrated acceptance letters with tears she wiped away before they could fall. But as Vanessa rose, something else crept in: shame. It arrived quietly, disguised as independence. It sounded like embarrassment when friends dropped her off too close to home. It looked like impatience when Evelyn asked questions about school. And one day it became distance. Evelyn felt the shift long before Vanessa ever said a word. She felt it in shorter calls, postponed visits, a new way her daughter avoided details. Still, Evelyn never confronted her. Love, she believed, was not an interrogation. It was patience stretched thin and still holding. 35 years passed like that, working, praying, waiting. Evelyn never remarried. She never chased comfort. Her life narrowed to essentials: work, faith, and a love that did not demand anything back. By the time Vanessa left for good, Evelyn had learned how to live without being seen. But she never learned how to stop loving. And somewhere beneath the weight of all those quiet years, a truth waited patiently, one that would soon rise to the surface, demanding to be acknowledged at last. Vanessa Morales learned early how to read a room. In classrooms, she learned which answers impressed teachers. At parties, she learned which smiles opened doors. And in boardrooms and charity galas, she mastered the quiet art of becoming exactly what others expected to see. Success for Vanessa was not an accident. It was constructed layer by careful layer. College was her first reinvention. She worked relentlessly, polished her resume, softened her accent, and edited her stories. Scholarships turned into internships. Internships turned into introductions. Each step lifted her farther from the cramped trailer and the smell of cleaning supplies that clung to her childhood. When classmates spoke about vacations and legacy homes, Vanessa learned to nod without explaining. She learned to omit. Then came Grant Whitmore. Grant moved through the world with an ease Vanessa had never known: old money manners, effortless confidence, a last name that opened accounts and closed deals. He admired her drive, her intelligence, her discipline. He spoke of building something together, and Vanessa heard salvation. With Grant came a new circle: private dinners, donor luncheons, charity boards where generosity was measured in photo opportunities. In that world, origin stories mattered, but only certain ones. Vanessa began to tell a cleaner version of her past. She spoke of being on her own young, of learning independence early. When pressed, she let people assume what they wanted. When asked about family, she kept it vague. It felt harmless at first, necessary even. She told herself she was protecting everyone involved. Her mother's name came up less and less. Marriage sealed the transformation. The house was bright and glassy, filled with neutral colors and silence that felt expensive. Vanessa curated every detail: the way she dressed, the way she spoke, the causes she supported. She became a fixture at charity events, praised for her compassion, admired for her polish. Cameras loved her. Applause followed her. But success has a way of collecting debt. At night when the house was quiet, Vanessa sometimes scrolled past old photos she never posted. A younger version of herself beside a woman with tired eyes and a hopeful smile. She would hesitate, then lock the phone and push the thought away. The life she built felt fragile, as if one wrong detail could expose the scaffolding beneath it. Calls from her mother became interruptions. Visits became complications. Vanessa postponed, redirected, and eventually avoided. It wasn't cruelty, she felt; it was fear. Fear that the truth would surface. Fear that Grant's world would recoil. Fear that everything she worked for could unravel if the past walked through the front door. So Vanessa made a choice, then another after that, each one smaller than the last but heavier. Distance became habit, silence became strategy, and shame left unchecked hardened into something colder. By every visible measure, Vanessa had won. She lived in a house people admired, wore clothes people noticed, and stood in rooms where decisions were made. But beneath the praise and the curated perfection, a quiet fracture spread. Because no matter how high she climbed, the cost of pretending grew steeper. And the one person she could not erase from her story, the woman who gave her everything, waited in the margins, holding a love Vanessa was no longer sure she deserved. Success had given Vanessa a new life, but it had also demanded a price, and that price, patiently unpaid, was about to come due. The church doors opened with a low creak, and sound followed wealth inside. The sharp click of heels on stone echoed down the aisle, cutting through the quiet that had lingered since dawn. Vanessa Morales entered first, her posture straight, her smile practiced. Behind her came three women from the charity committee, designer handbags resting on their arms, voices hushed but amused, already scanning the space for angles and light. They were there for photos, for a campaign, for proof of compassion. Evelyn was wiping the back pews when she heard the footsteps. The rhythm stopped her hand mid-motion. She knew that sound. Not the shoes, the voice. It reached her before she turned, a laugh she had once heard at bedtime years ago, before it learned to harden. Her chest tightened. For a moment, instinct told her to step aside, to disappear, as she had learned to do so well. But something steadied her feet. She turned. Time folded in on itself. The woman walking toward the altar was polished and distant, dressed in confidence Evelyn barely recognized. But the eyes, those were still her child's. Evelyn's breath caught. Her hands shook as she set the cloth down and took a careful step forward. "Vanessa," she said, barely above a whisper. The name landed like a dropped glass. Vanessa stopped. Panic flickered across her face before it vanished behind composure. Her friends slowed, curiosity sharpening into scrutiny. Vanessa turned, measuring the scene in a heartbeat, the setting, the witnesses, the risk. She chose control. "Yes," she replied, her voice even professional. "Can I help you?" Evelyn's heart stumbled. She smiled, hopeful, fragile. "It's me," she said softly. "Your mom." Silence spread. One of the women let out a short, uncomfortable laugh. Another raised her phone slightly, pretending to check a message. Vanessa's jaw tightened. She glanced around the church, aware of the eyes that might soon arrive, the story that could unravel if this moment went unchecked. "I think you're mistaken," Vanessa said, her tone cooling. "You should finish cleaning later. We're here for a charity shoot." Evelyn took another step, confusion and longing crossing her face. "Vanessa, please," she said. "I just wanted to—" Vanessa cut her off with a small, precise shake of her head. "My mother passed away," she said. The words were controlled, deliberate, rehearsed. "I don't know who you are." They fell heavy, echoing against the stone. Evelyn swayed, gripping the end of the pew. The world narrowed to the sound of her own breath. She searched her daughter's face for a crack, a sign, anything that resembled the child she had raised. She found none. One of the women leaned closer to Vanessa, whispering with a smirk, "This is awkward." Another sighed loudly, eyes already rolling. Evelyn lowered her gaze, shame flooding in behind the hurt. "I'm sorry," she murmured, more to herself than anyone else. She reached for her bucket, hands trembling. Vanessa exhaled, relieved the moment was slipping away. She turned back toward her friends, already reclaiming the role she knew how to play. But as Evelyn bent to continue her work, her foot caught the edge of the bucket. Water spilled across the floor, spreading toward the altar steps. Vanessa's expression snapped. And in the quiet before her next move, something unseen shifted in the shadows of the church, waiting. The bucket hit the floor with a hollow crack, and water rushed outward, darkening the marble Evelyn had just finished cleaning. She froze, staring at the spreading mess as if it were a personal failure written in plain sight. Her shoulders folded inward, instinctively bracing for rebuke. Vanessa's patience snapped. She stepped forward, heels sharp against stone, her expression tightening into something brittle. "Seriously," she said louder now. The word carried. It bounced off the columns and drew attention where none had been moments before. "This is exactly what I meant. You can't just wander around causing problems." Evelyn knelt immediately, reaching for the cloth with shaking hands. "I'll clean it," she said quickly. "I didn't mean," Vanessa cut her off. "You should be more careful," she said, her voice clipped. "At your age, accidents like this can be dangerous." The concern sounded practiced, hollow. It was not for Evelyn. It was for the scene. One of the women behind Vanessa let out a soft laugh. Another whispered, not quietly enough, "This is ruining the shot." Phones shifted in hands. Someone began recording, framing the moment as spectacle. Evelyn kept her eyes down, scrubbing harder than necessary. Water soaked the hem of her skirt. Her fingers trembled, but she did not stop. She had learned long ago that the fastest way to survive embarrassment was to make yourself smaller. Vanessa watched, jaw set. The words her mother had spoken earlier, "your mom," echoed in her mind like an alarm she refused to hear. She felt the familiar pressure rise, the fear of being seen, of being questioned, of being pulled backward into a story she had worked so hard to escape. She straightened, turning slightly so her friends could hear her clearly. "I don't know who you think you are," Vanessa said, her tone firm, rehearsed, "but you need to stop this. This is harassment." She gestured toward Evelyn as if indicating a stranger who had crossed a line. "My mother is gone. She has been for years." The words landed with finality. Evelyn's hand stopped mid-scrub. Slowly she looked up. Her face was pale, her eyes glassy with shock. "Vanessa," she said, her voice breaking, despite her effort to hold it steady. "I carried you. I raised you." That's enough," Vanessa snapped. Her voice cracked through the church, sharp as a blade. Conversations from the entrance died instantly. Even the air seemed to pull back. "I don't know you," Vanessa said again, more loudly this time, as if volume could make it true. "And I need you to leave me alone." A hush followed. Someone shifted uncomfortably. Another person murmured, "Wow." Evelyn's mouth opened, then closed. Whatever hope had kept her standing drained from her posture. She nodded once, a small, defeated motion, and returned her attention to the floor. A tear slipped free and fell into the water she was wiping away. Vanessa felt it then, a sting behind her ribs. Not guilt. Not yet. Something closer to panic. She turned away before it could grow, before it could ask questions she was not prepared to answer. Behind them, all unseen by most, a figure in white stepped forward from the shadows near the confessional. His face held no surprise, only a deep, measured sorrow. He had heard every word. He had seen the wound opened in a place meant for healing, and the silence that followed was not empty. It was waiting. Vanessa should have walked away. The moment had already gone too far. The denial, the raised voice, the eyes watching from the back of the church, any one of those should have ended it. But pride has momentum. Once it starts moving, it demands a finish. She turned toward the small side counter near the sacristy, where volunteers kept refreshments for early services. A metal carafe sat there, still steaming. The scent of burnt coffee lingered in the air, sharp and bitter. One of the women from the committee followed her with a curious glance. "Vanessa," someone whispered. "Let's just—" Vanessa lifted the carafe. Evelyn was still on her knees, blotting the water from the marble with methodical care, as if restoring order might restore peace. Her shoulders shook slightly. She had not looked up again. She did not see what was coming. Vanessa returned slowly, deliberately, the way people do when they want to be seen making a point. She stopped just behind Evelyn, the heat from the carafe warming her hand. Her friends fell silent. A phone camera tilted upward, catching the angle. "You need to understand something," Vanessa said, her voice low, controlled. "You don't belong in my life." Evelyn turned confused just in time to feel it. The coffee poured out in a sudden arc, dark and violent, soaking through the thin fabric of her dress. The heat struck, first white-hot, shocking. Evelyn cried out a raw sound that tore through the church and bounced off the stone. She recoiled, losing balance, her hands scrambling against the floor as the liquid spread. Gasps rippled through the space. Evelyn collapsed to her knees again, this time, not to clean, but to escape the pain. Her hands shook as she tried to pull the fabric away from her skin. Tears streamed down her face, mixing with the coffee staining the marble. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then laughter, nervous at first, then louder. One of the women covered her mouth, half smiling, half stunned. Another raised her phone higher, framing the scene as if it were unreal, as if distance could turn cruelty into content. Vanessa stood over her mother, breathing hard. The moment stretched, waiting to be claimed. She leaned down just enough that only Evelyn could hear. "This is what happens," she whispered, her voice cold, trembling with something she refused to name, "when you don't know your place." Evelyn looked up at her through tears, pain radiating across her face. Her voice came out broken but clear. "God forgive you, my child," she said softly, "because I already have." Those words landed heavier than the coffee ever could. Vanessa straightened, startled by the calm in them. She took a step back, then another, as if retreating from something she could not see. Her friends began murmuring, suddenly unsure. The laughter died. The phones wavered. Evelyn bowed her head, pressing her lips together to hold back another cry. She did not curse. She did not accuse. She whispered a prayer instead, words shaped by decades of quiet faith. From the shadows near the confessional, the man in white moved. He had not intervened before. He had allowed choice to reveal itself fully without interruption. But as Evelyn's pain echoed through the church, his expression changed not to rage, but to something deeper and far more final. Justice was no longer approaching. It had arrived. The laughter died first. Then the phones lowered. What remained was the sound of Evelyn's uneven breathing and the faint hiss of cooling liquid on stone. From the shadow beside the confessional, the man in white stepped forward. He had been there the entire time, close enough to hear every word, still enough to be mistaken for absence. Now as he moved into the light, something shifted in the room. Not fear, not awe. A sudden quiet awareness, as if everyone present realized they were no longer alone in the way they thought. Jesus Christ knelt beside Evelyn without hesitation. The marble stained his robe. He did not brush it away. He placed one hand gently beneath Evelyn's arm, the other over her burned skin. His touch was firm but impossibly tender, like cool water meeting fire. Evelyn flinched once, then stopped. The pain receded. Her breathing slowed. The tremor in her hands eased. She looked up at him, confused, searching, as if she already knew the answer, but needed permission to believe it. He met her gaze with a look she had carried in her prayers for decades, one that held memory, patience, and unexhausted love. "You are not forgotten," he said quietly. Those nearest felt it before they understood it. The air grew still. Even Vanessa's breath caught in her throat. She stood frozen, watching as the woman she had just humiliated stopped crying. Watching as the dark stain on Evelyn's dress began to fade, the fabric drying before their eyes, the skin beneath unmarked. Evelyn touched her arm, then her shoulder, then her hands. No burns, no blisters, only warmth, steady and alive. Tears filled her eyes again, but these were different. She whispered his name without sound. Jesus Christ helped her to her feet. The movement was slow, deliberate, restoring dignity before restoring posture. He did not glance toward Vanessa yet. He focused on Evelyn as if the rest of the world had dissolved. "You did not curse," he said to her. "You did not strike back. You chose love." Evelyn's voice shook. "She is my daughter," she said simply. Jesus Christ nodded as if that explained everything. Only then did he turn. Vanessa felt the weight of his gaze before it reached her face. It was not anger that met her, no raised voice, no accusation. It was something far more unsettling, truth unshielded by cruelty. Mercy offered but not forced. "You saw her pain," he said calmly. "And you added to it." Vanessa opened her mouth. Nothing came out. The room felt smaller, tighter, as if the walls themselves were listening. "She carried you when you could not stand," he continued. "She fed you when she was hungry. She prayed for you when you denied her existence." His voice did not rise. It did not need to. "And still she forgave you." Vanessa's knees weakened. The confidence she had built brick by brick cracked all at once. Her friends stepped back, suddenly strangers. The phones were gone now, hidden in shame. Jesus Christ looked at Evelyn once more, then back to Vanessa. "Love does not keep score," he said, "but truth always keeps time." The church bells began to ring, unplanned, unprompted. The sound rolled through the building, slow and heavy. Jesus Christ stepped back into the light one last time, his presence lingering even as his form seemed to soften, recede. Evelyn stood whole, unburned, unbroken, and Vanessa stood exposed, not yet punished, not yet forgiven, but finally seen. That night the house on the hill glowed like a promise kept. Light spilled from tall windows onto manicured hedges, and soft music drifted across the patio, where servers moved with practiced ease. Inside, crystal glasses clinked, laughter rose and fell, and success was served course by course. Vanessa stood at the center of it all. She wore a dress chosen weeks ago, tailored to perfection, a color meant to signal confidence. To anyone watching, she was exactly who she had always presented herself to be: composed, generous, untouchable. Donors praised the wine. Investors complimented the view. Cameras flashed, capturing a version of her that smiled without effort. But beneath the music, something was off rhythm. Vanessa laughed when expected, nodded at the right moments, but her mind kept drifting back to the church. The marble floor, the silence, the look in Evelyn's eyes after the pain had vanished. And worse than the memory was the calm, the way Jesus Christ had spoken, the way he had looked at her without hatred. Truth always lingers longer than applause. Beautiful event, someone said, lifting a glass. You really have it all. Vanessa smiled. We're blessed, she replied automatically. Grant joined her side, proud and relaxed, unaware of the storm pressing against her ribs. I closed 2 deals already, he said quietly. Tonight's a win. The words struck her harder than expected. A server announced dinner. Guests moved toward the long table set beneath a chandelier that cost more than most people's homes. As they sat, conversation turned to charity, who was helping whom, where generosity would be photographed next. Vanessa listened, responding on instinct the way she always had. Then someone asked the question she feared most. Your mother must be so proud of you, a woman across the table said casually. I don't think I've ever met her. The room waited, polite and curious. Vanessa felt her pulse in her throat. For a moment, a dangerous, fleeting moment, she considered telling the truth. The real truth. The woman who worked before dawn. The hands that never let go. The forgiveness that still echoed. But the walls were too close. The eyes too many. She passed away years ago, Vanessa said smoothly. It's something I don't talk about much. The lie settled into place, heavier than the last. Sympathetic murmurs followed. Someone reached out to squeeze her hand. Grant frowned, slightly surprised but trusting. I didn't know, he said softly. Vanessa met his gaze and nodded. It's hard, she replied. Outside, a breeze passed through the trees. Somewhere far below the hill, a woman finished her evening prayers in a quiet room, unaware of the words spoken against her name once again. Back at the table, dessert was served. The guests relaxed. Business resumed. Laughter returned louder now, relieved the mood had been managed. But Vanessa barely tasted the food. Each compliment rang hollow. Each smile felt borrowed. The lie she told so easily for years now scraped against something raw inside her. She excused herself briefly, stepping into the hallway where the noise dimmed. She caught her reflection in a mirror, perfectly composed, perfectly distant. For the first time, it did not comfort her. Because this lie felt different, final, as if something unseen had marked it, not with anger, but with consequence. She remembered the words spoken earlier that day, truth keeps time, and felt a chill settle beneath her skin. The party continued. The guests left impressed. Deals were celebrated, and somewhere between the last goodbye and the quiet that followed, Vanessa sensed it clearly. This was the final lie she would be allowed to tell before everything she had built began to answer for it. The unraveling did not arrive with sirens or shouting. It came quietly, disguised as routine. 2 mornings after the dinner, Vanessa's phone rang before sunrise. She ignored it at first, assuming it was another reminder, another calendar alert. The calls kept coming. By the time she answered, her heart was already racing. There had been an irregularity. That was the word the banker used, careful, neutral. A flagged transaction. Then several. Accounts temporarily frozen out of caution. Vanessa assured him it had to be a mistake. She had advisors, systems, safeguards. The banker agreed. Of course, these things happened all the time. By noon, Grant was home early. He stood in the kitchen, tie-loosened phone still in his hand, staring at nothing. The dealership's credit line is suspended, he said flatly. All of them. Vanessa felt the room tilt. That's impossible. By evening, it was no longer a single issue. Vendors began calling, then lenders, then attorneys. Emails stacked up faster than they could be opened. Passwords stopped working. Access vanished. Funds that had always been there solid dependable were suddenly unreachable. By the third day, the truth was undeniable. Everything was gone. Not mismanaged. Not misplaced. Gone. Drained through a chain of failures no one could fully explain. Cybersecurity firms were brought in. Accountants pored over records. The conclusion was the same every time: there would be no recovery, no reversal, no one to sue. Grant sat at the dining table long after midnight papers spread like debris from a collapse. We did everything right, he kept saying, as if repetition might rebuild the walls. We were careful. Vanessa said nothing. She watched her hands instead, perfectly manicured, now trembling. The days that followed stripped away more than money. Invitations stopped. Calls went unanswered. Friends from the charity committee sent polite messages, then none at all. The same people who had toasted their success now avoided eye contact in public. At the grocery store, Vanessa saw a familiar face turn abruptly down another aisle. Within a week, the house on the hill was no longer theirs. Notices arrived. Assets were liquidated, jewelry sold, art removed from the walls. Rooms emptied until the silence felt accusatory. Grant changed too. The man who once spoke of vision and legacy grew sharp, restless. "I trusted you," he said one night, pacing the living room. "You handled the image. The relationships. If something went wrong," he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Vanessa absorbed the words without protest. For the first time in years, there was nothing left to defend. No narrative to manage. No version of herself polished enough to survive scrutiny. She lay awake at night, replaying moments she had buried, her mother's voice steady, even in pain. The calm in Jesus Christ's eyes. The sentence she could not forget: truth always keeps time. Outside their shrinking world, Evelyn continued her days as she always had. She rose early. She worked. She prayed. She did not know what was unfolding. She asked for nothing. And that was the most unsettling part. Vanessa had expected anger, retribution, some visible act of punishment. Instead, what she faced was absence of protection, of illusion, of the fragile structure she had mistaken for safety. By the end of the week, standing among boxes in a house no longer theirs, Vanessa finally understood this was not chaos. It was consequence, precise and unhurried. Justice had not rushed in. It had waited until the lie was complete, until there was nothing left to hide behind. And now, with everything gone, Vanessa was left with the one thing she had avoided for years: the truth. The fever began after midnight. At first, Vanessa thought it was exhaustion, another symptom of days without sleep, another price of the collapse. But when she touched her son's forehead, the heat startled her. It was sharp, unnatural, as if his small body were burning from the inside out. He stirred, whimpering, his breath shallow and fast. Grant fumbled for the thermometer. The numbers climbed, then stopped at a mark that made him go pale. They rushed through the dark in a borrowed car, the city sliding past in streaks of light. The private hospital turned them away, insurance lapsed, records frozen. The public emergency room was crowded and loud, a waiting room full of tired parents and crying children. Vanessa stood holding her son, rocking gently, whispering words she had not used in years. "Please, please." Hours passed. A young doctor finally examined the child, his face tight with concern. Severe infection, medication required, tests needed. The list was long. The options were not. By morning, Grant had stepped outside to make calls that went unanswered. Vanessa sat alone in a narrow room, watching the rise and fall of her son's chest, counting breaths as if numbers could hold the world together. She had run out of plans, out of defenses, out of pride. When the nurse left, Vanessa slid down the wall and sank to the floor. Her hands shook. The words came before she could stop them, unpolished, unstrategized. "I know I don't deserve help," she whispered into the quiet. "I know what I did. I know who I hurt." Her voice cracked. "If there's any justice left for me, take it. Just please don't take him." The room was still, then the air changed. Not with a sound, not with light, with presence. She felt it before she saw him, a calm that did not belong to the hospital, a steadiness that did not answer to fear. When Vanessa lifted her head, he was there, standing near the window, dressed simply in white, as if he had always been part of the room, and she had only just learned how to see. Jesus had returned. She did not scream. She did not run. Her body knew before her mind could follow. She bowed her head, tears falling freely now, no longer restrained by dignity. "You came," she said, barely audible. I never left, he replied. He stepped closer, placing a hand on the child's forehead. The fever did not vanish instantly. There was no spectacle, no command spoken into the air, only a quiet authority that settled into the room like dawn. He will live, Jesus said. But this is not the end of your lesson? Vanessa looked up desperate. I'll do anything. He met her gaze not harshly, not kindly. Truthfully, anything is not the same as obedience. She swallowed. Tell me. You will go to your mother, he said. You will tell her the truth, every part you buried. You will ask for forgiveness without conditions, without defense. He paused. And you will rebuild what you destroyed, not with money, but with humility. Her shoulders shook. And if she won't forgive me, she already has, Jesus said gently. That was never the question. He turned back to the child, pressing his palm lightly against the small chest. The breathing eased. The trembling stopped. Color returned slowly, unmistakably. Vanessa sobbed, covering her mouth. Jesus stepped back. Justice stripped you so mercy could reach you, he said. Do not waste what suffering has taught you. Then, as quietly as he had come, he was gone. When the nurse returned moments later, she paused at the doorway, confused. The fever's breaking, she said. It doesn't make sense, but it's coming down fast. Vanessa nodded through tears she did not wipe away. For the first time, she did not ask why. She knew what came next. Vanessa took the bus across town just after sunrise. She wore no jewelry, no tailored lines, no armor. The city passed by in ordinary fragments, grocery bags, school backpacks, a man sweeping a sidewalk. Each stop felt like a step closer to something she had avoided her entire adult life. Evelyn opened the door slowly. Time had softened her face, but not her posture. When she saw her daughter standing there, empty-handed, eyes, red voice caught in her throat, she did not step back. Vanessa dropped to her knees. The apology came without polish or defense. It was not efficient. It did not protect her pride. She spoke of the lies she had repeated until it felt true, the fear that ruled her choices, the cruelty she committed in a place meant for mercy. She spoke of the night everything collapsed and the moment her child burned with fever. She spoke until there were no words left to hide behind. Evelyn listened. When the silence finally settled, she knelt too, pulling her daughter into an embrace that had been waiting years to be returned. Truth doesn't erase the past, she said softly, but it can heal it. Vanessa told the truth everywhere after that, first to Grant, then to the people who had praised her most loudly. Some walked away, some stayed. The consequences did not reverse. The house did not return. The money did not reappear. But something else took root. They moved into a small apartment. Vanessa took work that asked for effort, not image. She learned the dignity of showing up without applause. On Saturdays, she joined her mother at the church, not for photos, not for campaigns, but to clean floors, serve meals, and listen to names she used to overlook. Grant learned too. Pride thinned. Patience grew. Their marriage stopped being a display and became a practice. Years passed. The work stayed ordinary. The change did not fade. One afternoon, a woman sat alone in the back pew, well-dressed and shaking. Vanessa sat beside her without introductions. She listened. She spoke when asked. She pointed not to herself, but to a quiet woman polishing the altar. That's my mother, she said. She taught me what real wealth looks like. The legacy spread without banners. Through service, through honesty, through forgiveness that refused to keep score. And sometimes when the church was nearly empty and the light fell just right, Evelyn felt a presence near the confessional, familiar, gentle. Not to accuse, to remind. Because justice had done its work, and mercy had finished it. If this story moved you, don't let it end here. Like the video, subscribe and join Stories of Grace, where real lives meet truth, mercy, and transformation. Share it with someone who needs courage to tell the truth, strength to ask forgiveness, or hope to begin again.